Two cops thought they found their next target, chaining a rusty old ball to my leg like I was just another nobody they could mess with. They laughed, thinking I was someone they could push around without a second thought. But here's the thing. They had no idea who I really was or the storm that was about to hit them. So let me set the scene for you. Name's Benny James, 47 years old. Just a few days back, I officially took the reins as chief of police for Blake County. Big job, big responsibility. But that's not what got my adrenaline pumping today. Now, what really got me excited was this brilliant idea I had of walking through the precinct without my uniform on. Why? Call it curiosity or maybe just testing the waters. I wanted to see the true colors of my team. Check if they're the type to act differently when the boss isn't around. Not exactly standard protocol, but hey, I was never one for blending in anyway. I stroll into the main hall, minding my own business, just another face in a sea of blue. And I kid you not, the moment I cross the threshold, these two officers, Tom and Johnny, zero in on me like I'm their next case. I can feel their eyes sizing me up, and not in a friendly welcome to the team kind of way. Tom, he's maybe in his early 30s, got that look in his eye like he's seen it all and thinks he knows it all too. He steps forward, squinting, throwing out that silent, "you don't belong here" vibe. Then, without skipping a beat, he calls out to me loud enough for everyone with an earshot to stop and look. "Hey, you!" he barks, his tone as cold as the air conditioning blasting from the vents. "This ain't a public hangout, buddy. Why don't you turn right around and walk out?" He's got this cocky little smirk on his face, and I can tell he's itching to start something. Before I can even process the audacity, his partner, Johnny, who's a bit older but no less smug, adds in with a grin. "Relax, Tom. Maybe he just got lost, you know?" Now here's the thing. I could have set them straight right there, told them who I was, and watched those smirks drop right off their faces. But no. I decided to play it cool and let this little scene unfold. I wanted to see just how far these guys were willing to take it. So I give them my calmest smile and say, "Just taking a look around. Wanted to see how things run here." Tom's eyes narrow, and he shares this knowing look with Johnny, as if they're in on some grand joke. I'm not part of it. Johnny, trying to suppress a laugh, raises an eyebrow at me. The vibe's not just dismissive, it's practically daring me to say one more word. Tom steps a little closer, arms crossed, almost like he's challenging me. "See, that's the thing," he drawls, voice dripping with sarcasm. "We don't really do open tours here. So, unless you've got a reason to be here, I'd suggest you find the exit." Johnny chuckles, adding, "Guess you don't get a lot of free samples around here, huh?" I feel a small spark of irritation, but I keep my cool. This isn't the time to blow my cover. Not yet. There's something oddly fascinating about watching them assume they've got the upper hand. All right, so here I am, just standing there, letting Tom and Johnny play out their little power trip. At first, I figure maybe they'll back off once they see I'm not reacting. But nope. The longer I stay quiet, the more intense their stares get. It's like they've locked onto me, convinced they've got a real mystery man on their hands. Johnny tilts his head, gives me this look like I just stepped out of a sci-fi movie, and then he hits me with a question that sounds more like an accusation. "So who exactly do you think you are, just strolling around here?" He raises an eyebrow, clearly enjoying his little game. The tension builds, and I can tell the entire room is watching, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But here's the thing. I'm not some rookie cop trying to prove myself. I'm not some lowly officer to be dismissed. I'm Benny James, the new chief of police. I've been through the fire, and I know how to handle a situation like this without losing my cool. I take a slow breath. Let the silence build between us. My calm demeanor is starting to get under their skin. I see Tom's jaw clench and Johnny's smirk twitch like they're about to break. And then I speak. My voice is steady, low, almost like I'm bored of the whole thing. "Who do I think I am?" I repeat, with a slow, mocking grin of my own. "I think I'm the guy who's about to change the game around here, but for now I'm just here to see how well your little show plays out." Tom looks like he's ready to say something snarky, but then Johnny steps in, his face suddenly not quite as confident. He's starting to get the vibe that something's off, that maybe this isn't just some random guy wandering through the precinct. But Tom's stubborn, so he pushes, still trying to be the big shot. Well, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing. Tom growls. But you're not going to last long around here if you think you can walk in and... Before he can finish, I drop it on them. The whole damn truth. I smile. It's not a friendly smile. It's the kind of smile that says, you've just walked into a lion's den. I'm Benny James, I say, letting the words linger in the air. Chief of Police for Blake County, and you two are already on thin ice. The shift in the room is instant. I can practically feel the temperature drop as their cocky demeanor vanishes in an instant. Tom stumbles backward a step, eyes wide. Johnny's face pales, and for the first time, I see the realization hit them like a ton of bricks. I lean in, my voice cold and unyielding. You're lucky I'm not here to make an example out of you today, I say. But don't make the mistake of thinking you can mess with me or anyone else in this precinct. You're not above the law, and it's about time you learn that. I pause, letting that sink in. Their faces are priceless. They don't know whether to apologize, get defensive, or run. But all I do is turn my back and walk away, making sure to give them one last thing to think about, my footsteps echoing in the silence they left behind. And just like that, they know this game's over, treating him like this. His voice takes on a mocking tone. Maybe he's in shock, realizing he's out of his depth. Johnny, clearly enjoying the show, leans in closer. His face inches from mine. Or maybe he's just trying to figure out how to talk his way out of this mess. Gotta admit, though, you've got guts, just sitting there without saying a word. I stay silent, keeping my eyes locked on theirs, letting them stew in their assumptions. The longer I stay quiet, the more they're digging themselves into a hole. Each word they speak only making their own judgment of me seem more ridiculous. Their egos are so inflated, they can't even begin to realize the irony of the situation. They think they're dealing with some outsider they can bully, but I'm playing a longer game. Tom steps back, surveying me like I'm a puzzle he can't solve. He circles around me just to get a better angle, still trying to size me up. I let him. I'm not about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me react. They're getting desperate, and it's amusing how far they'll go just to keep up the charade. Johnny continues, the smirk still plastered on his face. Most guys would have cracked by now, but you're not saying much, huh? Gotta be hiding something. I can feel my patience wearing thin, but I don't show it. I let them continue, almost as if I'm a spectator watching their little act unfold. Their faces are flushed now, their earlier smugness giving way to frustration. Every move they make is more erratic, more desperate to get a rise out of me. And yet I remain as calm as ever, a stone wall in their midst. Tom paces a little more, coming back around to my side, his tone still trying to provoke. So what's your deal, huh? You some sort of undercover officer? Maybe someone who thinks they can just walk in here and pull a fast one on us? Johnny chimes in. Yeah, or maybe you've been here before, huh? Trying to figure out who's in charge around here. 'Cause let me tell you, you're not it. The air between us is thick with tension now. And just when I think they've pushed me as far as they can, Johnny finally snaps, All right, enough of this. Let's just call it what it is. You're nothing but a lost nobody who wandered into the wrong place at the wrong time. I turn my head slightly, finally breaking my silence. My voice is quiet but carries weight like a slow storm rolling in. You're both wrong, I say, watching the smirk start to fade. And I'm going to prove it to you in ways you won't forget. The shift is immediate. Tom stops pacing, his eyes narrowing in confusion, and Johnny stares at me like he's just realized he's been playing with fire. They thought they had me cornered. They thought they could treat me like just another face in the crowd. But I'm not just anyone. And I'm not playing their game anymore. For a moment the room is eerily still. Then, with a sudden movement, I stand, pushing past Tom as I rise from the chair they'd shoved me into. You think you got me figured out, huh? I ask, stepping into their space now, my voice colder than before. Well, I've got news for you, you don't. I don't belong in your little game. And you, I gesture at Johnny, are about to see just how much you've underestimated me. The tension crackles in the air as I take another step closer. They're starting to realize this is no longer a game. What they've done, treating me like some outsider, some problem, is going to come back on them, and I'm not going to let it slide. Tom, still unsure, glances at Johnny. But it's too late. They've already made their mistake. The real storm is about to hit. Disapproving, his eyes flicking from Tom to Johnny, and then landing on me. It's clear he doesn't quite know what to make of the situation, but something about the way his brows furrowed tells me he senses something isn't right. He takes a few steps closer, assessing the scene. Tom, still caught up in his little performance, tries to cover his tracks. "Just a routine check, Sergeant. Nothing out of the ordinary," he says with a shrug, the cocky grin still plastered on his face. Johnny, picking up on the tension, adds with a sarcastic chuckle, "Yeah, just making sure our guest here isn't hiding anything. You know how it is, right?" But Sergeant Ray isn't buying it. His gaze sharpens as he looks between the two of them, then finally settles back on me. There's a slight shift in his expression, like he's starting to piece things together. He steps forward, his voice taking on a more commanding tone. "Is that so? You're patting this man down without any clear reason?" Tom hesitates, but Johnny quickly jumps in, trying to deflect. "We thought he was acting suspicious, Sergeant. He just walked in here like he owned the place. We were just making sure." Sergeant Ray cuts him off, his tone firm. "That's not how we do things here, Johnny. You don't just make assumptions and start manhandling people. Where's the reason? The justification?" Johnny opens his mouth, but Ray doesn't let him continue. "You two, step back. I'll handle this." The tension in the room shifts as Ray's presence makes it clear who's in charge. Tom and Johnny exchange looks, but wisely decide not to argue. They take a few steps back, their smirks fading as they realize this isn't going the way they expected. Sergeant Ray finally turns to me, his eyes softening just a little. "You all right?" he asks, his tone now genuine, trying to gauge whether I'm hurt or upset. There's a small glimmer of respect in his gaze, though it's clear he still doesn't fully understand what's going on. I nod, keeping my calm. "I'm fine, Sergeant. Just been caught in a little misunderstanding." Ray lets out a small sigh and looks over at Tom and Johnny again, shaking his head. "I don't care what kind of game you two thought you were playing, but this isn't it. Get back to your posts now." There's a moment of silence as Tom and Johnny process what just happened. They clearly weren't expecting to be reprimanded. The tension between us lingers for a second, but as they shuffle off to do what they're told, the quiet satisfaction of knowing I've just flipped the script settles in. I sit there for a moment, letting the weight of the situation sink in. Tom and Johnny think they've been in control this whole time, but now they're the ones on the back foot. Sergeant Ray, while not fully understanding who I am yet, at least has enough professionalism to know when to step in and stop a situation before it gets out of hand. I can feel the moment shifting. The respect I've earned in that room without saying a word is tangible now. Soon enough, they'll all know who I really am. But for now, I remain silent, letting them stew in the consequences of their actions. And when the time is right, I'll make sure they understand exactly why this quiet guest is the one they should have never underestimated. Admire his work, clearly proud of the situation he's created. He stands there, arms crossed, watching me like he's just won some kind of twisted victory. But even with the chain now locked around my ankle, I don't flinch. I don't react. I just sit there, keeping my composure, knowing full well that this is the point where everything begins to change. Ray watches the whole thing unfold, his expression darkening with every passing second. I can see the frustration building in his eyes as Tom and Johnny continue to dig themselves into a hole. At this point, even Ray knows this has gone too far, but he seems hesitant to intervene, unsure of how to handle the situation. Tom steps back, his chest puffed out, as though he's just proved something. "There, now you got a little more time to reflect on your behavior," he says, grinning like a schoolyard bully. "Hope you enjoy the extra weight." Johnny chuckles at the comment, clearly reveling in their dominance, but there's a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes now. They've crossed a line, and they both know it. Still, they push forward, trying to maintain that air of superiority, not realizing that they've just set the stage for something far bigger than they could ever imagine. Ray steps forward, his voice low but full of authority. "Tom, Johnny, that's enough," he says, his tone no longer patient but firm. "You two are pushing this way too far. Cut the crap and step back." Tom doesn't like being told what to do. He glares at Ray, his smirk fading slightly. "What's your problem, Ray?" "Just having a little fun with our guest here." But Ray doesn't budge. "No, you're crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed, and you know it. Take that off him now." The command hangs in the air, thick with the weight of Ray's authority. Johnny's smile falters, his excitement dissipating as he looks at Tom for guidance. But Tom's not sure how to handle this. His usual bravado is starting to crumble in the face of Ray's quiet but unmistakable power. For a moment, everything is still. Tom's eyes dart between Ray and me, as if trying to gauge whether or not he should push back, but he's out of his depth. The tension is so thick I could almost cut it with a knife. Then, just as Tom opens his mouth to protest, I finally speak up, my voice calm but laced with something far more commanding than I've shown so far. "You've made a mistake," I say quietly, the words hanging in the air, carrying more weight than they should. "And I don't think you understand who you're dealing with." Tom freezes, his expression faltering as he registers the change in my tone. Johnny looks between us, his smug grin fading, replaced with an unease he's not used to. They thought they had the upper hand. They thought they were in control. But now the tables are turning, and they don't know what's coming next. Ray looks at me, his eyes narrowing, as if suddenly recognizing that this is no ordinary situation. There's a shift in his stance, and I can feel the power dynamics in the room start to tilt. Tom finally stammers, trying to recover, but the confidence in his voice is gone. What do you mean?" His voice is shaky, unsure, no longer the cocky tone it was before. I smile, the slightest hint of satisfaction crossing my face. "I think it's time for you two to understand that I'm not someone you can push around. I'm not just a nobody, and you're about to find out just who I really am." With those words, the entire room feels like it shifts. Tom and Johnny are no longer the ones with the upper hand. I can see the panic creeping into their expressions, and I know it's only a matter of time before the truth comes to light. Their phones, as if this was just another weird scene to document for later amusement. No one steps in. No one asks why I'm being treated like this. It's as if the whole station's turned into a circus, and I'm the clown they're all waiting to laugh at. But I stay calm. I stand still. Let them laugh. Let them assume they've got all the power, all the control. They have no idea what's coming. Tom steps closer again, his grin stretching wider. "Guess you're learning what it feels like to be one of us," he says, the words dripping with arrogance. "Not so fun, huh?" He gives the chain a little shake, making sure it's still tightly secured. Johnny, still riding the high of his supposed victory, snickers. "Yeah, it's like you're finally getting a taste of real work, huh?" But as they go on, something's starting to change. Ray is watching more intently now, his discomfort growing as he senses the tension in the air. He's not blind to the absurdity of this whole situation, but he's still hesitant to make a move. For some reason, he seems unwilling to step in, perhaps waiting for me to do something, or maybe just unsure of how to break the act they've put on. The weight of the chain is dragging me down physically, but mentally, I'm as sharp as ever. I keep my face neutral, not giving away anything to Tom and Johnny. They don't deserve to know what's coming. They don't deserve to see that I'm in control, even if they think they've got the upper hand. I glance down at the ball and chain again, my thoughts racing. This is the moment. They think they're in charge. They think they've won. They have no idea who they're messing with. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of them basking in their false sense of power, I decide it's time. Slowly, deliberately, I look up at Tom and Johnny, meeting their smug expressions with a calm, composed gaze. I can feel the shift happening as I speak, as if the entire room has been holding its breath. "You have no idea who I am, do you?" I say quietly, my voice cutting through the laughter and the smugness like a blade. Tom freezes, his grin faltering as he looks at me, confusion crossing his face for the first time. Johnny's smirk slips slightly, as if something's just clicked in his head. I watch them for a moment longer, enjoying the dissonance in their expressions. Then I let the bomb drop. I'm Benny James, Chief of Police, Blake County. The silence that follows is deafening. Tom and Johnny stand frozen, their faces draining of color as they process the words I've just spoken. The weight of the situation is sinking in, and they realize, too late, the mistake they've made. I don't need to say anything else. The look on their faces says it all. The tables have turned, and it's now their turn to feel the heat. They were the ones who thought they had control, but now they're the ones trapped, staring at the consequences of their actions. I stay silent, watching them with calm, steady eyes. They don't know it yet, but their little game is about to end. Every word, every move they make, just adds more fuel to the fire. I can feel the tension building in the air as Ray watches with increasing suspicion. But Tom and Johnny, clueless as ever, continue with their charade. "Pretty confident for someone who doesn't belong here," Tom says, his voice laced with mockery. Johnny chimes in, his grin almost too wide to be believable. "You sure you're not a little out of your depth here, pal?" I don't respond. I don't need to. Every second that passes brings them closer to the truth, and I'm in no rush to end the show. They've underestimated me, and now it's only a matter of time before they realize just how wrong they were. Finally, I turn my gaze to Ray, giving him a slight nod. It's almost imperceptible, but it's enough. He knows something's off, and he's starting to put the pieces together. The time is almost here. Tom and Johnny are still playing their part, but I know their confidence is starting to crack. They can feel the shift, but they don't understand it. Not yet. And when they finally do, it's going to hit them like a ton of bricks. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere had shifted from the casual air of Tom and Johnny's little game to one of mounting tension. The smug smiles on their faces were starting to falter as they noticed the shift in the mood of the room. It was subtle at first, but the whispers from the other officers, the tension in Ray's face, and the growing murmurs in the hall were all signs that something had changed. Ray's hurried departure toward the chief's office was the first clue. He wasn't asking questions anymore. He was acting, and Tom and Johnny, still too full of their own importance, missed every cue. They were too busy laughing it off, still thinking they were in control of the situation. But that's when it hit them. As the door to the precinct opened with a loud bang, the noise from outside flooded in. The crowd outside was no longer just a few curious faces. It had grown into a mass of reporters, activists, and civilians, all demanding answers, all pointing fingers at what was happening inside the precinct. The shouting grew louder, and the cameras clicked in rapid succession. No one inside the precinct could ignore it anymore. Tom and Johnny turned toward the door, their grins faltering as the full weight of the situation dawned on them. Johnny was the first to speak, but his voice was more uncertain now. "What's going on out there?" he asked, but no one had an answer. He looked back at Tom, his eyes betraying the first sign of doubt. Tom, however, remained oblivious for a moment longer. He muttered something under his breath, trying to brush off the tension. But it was clear. Things were spiraling out of control. And then, like a switch had been flipped, the doors to the chief's office opened, and out stepped Ray, now accompanied by the real chief of police, the one who had been in charge all along. The chief was calm, but there was no mistaking the fire in his eyes. He had already seen the pictures, the story, and the crowd outside. He knew exactly what was going on. Tom and Johnny stood frozen, their grins completely gone. The realization was swift and brutal. The people they had been mocking, the nobody they had chained to a chair, was now the very person who held their future in his hands. The chief spoke first, his voice low and commanding. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he asked, not bothering to hide his disappointment. He turned to Ray, who was standing off to the side, his face still pale. "Ray, get me the details on this." And that's when the storm truly hit. Tom and Johnny were about to find out the hard way that no one is untouchable, especially not when they think they can toy with someone who's been playing the long game all along. The moment they thought they had me cornered was the very moment their careers started slipping away, messing with the integrity of this entire precinct. You were willing to humiliate someone who came here with respect and with a job to do, just to prove a point. Well, guess what? You've just proven something, all right, but it's not what you think. I let those words hang in the air, watching the weight of them sink in. The silence was thick, every eye in the room glued to me, waiting for the next move. Tom and Johnny stood there, unable to speak, the enormity of what they had done settling over them like a fog. Let me make one thing clear, I continued, my voice steady but cutting. This badge represents justice, honor, and integrity. It is not a tool for your personal amusement. And what you've just done? That's not just a violation of me. It's a violation of every person who trusts this department to protect and serve. I took a step forward, closer to Tom. His face was red, his breathing shallow as he finally tried to form words. I didn't mean— Shut it, I interrupted, my gaze never leaving his. You didn't just cross a line. You bulldozed right through it. Johnny was still frozen, the horror on his face palpable as his mind raced, trying to figure out a way out. But there was no escape for them, not now. Ray, still standing off to the side, glanced nervously between me and the two officers. He was clearly waiting for my next move. The other officers in the room had gone completely quiet, a mixture of guilt, shock, and anticipation in the air. Here's how this goes, I said, my tone taking on a firm, authoritative edge. Both of you are going to report to the chief's office immediately. I'll be following you in. We're going to have a very serious conversation about your behavior, and you'll both be held accountable. Understand? Neither of them responded at first. They just stood there, stunned, realizing that there was no way out of this for them. Finally, Johnny spoke up, his voice shaky. We didn't know. We didn't know it was you. You should have, I shot back coldly. You should have known better. I gave them one last look, one final glance to make sure they understood the gravity of the situation, before turning and walking toward the chief's office, motioning for them to follow. As I moved through the door, I could feel the eyes of every officer in the room still on me, their silence louder than any words. They were witnessing the moment everything changed. Tom and Johnny's careers were done, and their mistake was going to be a lesson for everyone in the precinct. Make no mistake, I said, turning back slightly before the door closed. This isn't just about the two of you. It's about everyone who wears this badge. And anyone who thinks they can disrespect the people they serve is going to find themselves on the other side of that desk. With that, the door shut, and the room fell into a silence so deep it felt like the calm before the storm. As I made my way out of the precinct, I could hear the murmur of reporters and the growing buzz outside. The weight of the moment settled on my shoulders, but it wasn't the kind of pressure that would break me. It was the kind of weight that would fuel me, reminding me of why I was here, why I'd fought for this job and this role. Respect wasn't just a word, it was a principle, a standard that defined not just how we served, but who we were as officers, as people. Outside, the crowd was still lively, reporters shouting questions, activists demanding answers, but I knew the shift had already begun. The message had been sent, loud and clear. Tom and Johnny's actions were just the beginning of the change I intended to bring, and now the rest of the team was seeing the consequences of their behavior. As I walked to my car, the cameras flashing behind me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet satisfaction. It wasn't about making a spectacle. It wasn't about being seen or getting credit. It was about making sure something like this didn't happen again. The integrity of the precinct was bigger than one officer or two bad decisions. It was about the standard we all upheld, and that was something no one could ignore anymore. In the end, this wasn't just about punishment. It was about setting the tone for the future. Tom and Johnny would face their consequences, sure, but the ripple effects would go much further. The way we treated others mattered, and today I'd made sure everyone in that room knew that. Respect. It was the foundation. It had to be.